This case was requested by Rosie Red, and I read that trials are neither initiated or pursued against those who have died. I read that on the Crown Prosecution's website. So for that reason, and I believe that reason only, nobody has been charged or convicted with this murder. Disclaimers before we start are a must. This is a true crime, it involves real people, and these real people have real families. So I do want you to share it and I do want you to comment, but please be a bit sensitive as you do so. Gracie Elizabeth Spinks was born on the 19th of October 1997 in Chesterfield, Derbyshire, England. After leaving college, she qualified and worked as a lifeguard and swimming instructor at the Queen's Park Leisure Centre in Chesterfield. However, due to what was happening around the world in 2020 and 2021, she got furloughed. For those of you that don't know what that means, basically furlough it's like a temporary redundancy. So because of what was happening, the swimming pools weren't open, so therefore there was no work for her. So instead of firing her or making her redundant, they put you on furlough. When it reopens and the work picks back up, you can come back to work. And I assume because at the time the government was subsidising people on furlough, she was getting paid as well. So now, temporarily out of work, she got a job at Xbite in Chesterfield as a warehouse operative. At this time, she's living in Old Whittington, which is in Chesterfield, and I believe she's living with a mom and a mom's partner. She was a keen horse rider, and she kept a horse at Blue Lodge Farm in Duckmanton. This is about 5 miles away from where she lived. I also read that she was a part-time model. On a website that we'll talk about more in detail later, it says, Gracie was vivacious, outgoing, friendly, and an amazing young woman. Fiercely independent and busy living life to the full. Looking forward to the future and all it promised. But in February 2021, she reported a colleague at Xbite to the police for stalking. This colleague was Michael Sellers, and he was actually apparently a supervisor at the warehouse that she was working. I read that he was her supervisor. Born on the 7th of February 1986, Michael Sellers was from Sheffield, which although is a huge city, it's neighbouring Chesterfield. At the time of this case, in June 2021, at the age of 35, so 12 years Gracie's senior, he was unemployed. I read that it became a nuisance at work to her, and work had to deal with it. He did wait at the Orsfield one morning before, which really spooked her, and that prompted her to ring the police. So if we put two and two together, it seems very much like his behaviour towards Gracie is what got him fired, and I did read that in 1 or 2 articles as well, so we can assume that that's true. And then, obviously, he's turned up at the Orsfield where Gracie is, and she's gone, no, that's enough, and she's phoned the police. In response to Gracie phoning the police went and talked to Michael and to Gracie. But as far as I can tell, not much more were done. So on Friday, the 18th of June, 2021, 23-year-old Gracie Spinks was last seen by her mom as she was leaving the house. She was going to tend to a horse, and that were at 7:30 in the morning. She then drove to Blue Lodge Farm, which, like I said, is about 5 miles away. From what I looked at on Google Maps, it's about 10 to 15 minutes drive. Then, just after 8 AM, only half an hour after she left home, 2 people found Gracie laid in the horse field, unconscious and bleeding heavily. One witness reports seeing a man running away up Top Lane. Initially, these 2 witnesses presume that she's been kicked by a horse and she needs help. So they start giving CPR to Gracie, but she was unresponsive. The first paramedic arrived at 17 minutes past 8 in the morning, and when they did, they realised that her injuries were actually caused by a serious assault with a weapon. The police were then called at 20 to 9. Resurrection procedures were performed on Gracie, but unfortunately, on scene at 10 to 9, life was pronounced extinct. A post-mortem was carried out, and that found the cause of death was a stab wound to the neck. It cut through the carotid artery, the jugular vein, and the cervical spine. The cervical spine, if you don't know, is a vertebrae in the neck just below the skull. For those of you that are wondering, there was no evidence of sexual assault, which I didn't really expect there to be fair. If just nothing sounds like that type of attack. Anyway, the post-mortem said it weren't that type of assault. The police arrived at Blue Lodge Farm at 9 AM, and it weren't long after that Michael's vehicle was found on Rectory Lane, which is adjacent to the field on Blue Lodge Farm. Now, that's what I read on every single source, but I looked up Rectory Lane in Duckmanton, and it doesn't exist. There's a Rectory Road, but no Rectory Lane. but nothing mentions Rectory Road. Every source is Rectory Lane. So I'm going to have to assume that's it. I have looked up more historical searches to see if I could find it, and it hadn't recently changed its name or anything. So we're going to have to assume it is that road. So now, with Michael's car found, an area search commenced looking for Michael. Then at 11 AM, a local resident found Michael's body. Now again, newspapers not really checking what they say. There's so many different versions of where Michael was found. The most common are it was near some stables on Blue Lodge Farm, surrounded by trees and bushes, and in other states it was in a field about half a mile away. Either which way, it was found in the area, and when he was found, it was unresponsive and cold to touch. The East Midlands Ambulance Service were called, and at 10 minutes past 12, his life was pronounced extinct. It's suspected that he took his own life through starving his body of oxygen, and gas canisters were found near his body. It was then formally identified at 2:30 on the 20th of June. The police took a closer look to his movements that morning, and they discovered that just after 6:30 that morning, on the 18th of June, Mr. Sellers left the family home in his own vehicle. Gracie's funeral was held on Friday the 23rd of June at Old Whittington Church. Near to Gracie's 24th birthday, her parents spoke out and accused Derbyshire police of letting her down prior to her death. Her mum said, "We feel like she was really let down by the police. She made a complaint and they just basically didn't join up the dots." Yeah, join up the dots. Because weeks before Gracie was murdered, a bag containing weapons was found a few hundred yards away. On the 21st of June 2021, Derbyshire Police made a Facebook post, and within that Facebook post it said, "We can confirm that the force has referred itself to the Independent Office of Police Conduct, because we had contact with Gracie earlier this year." 1 year later, on the 8th of June 2022, the IOPC concluded their investigation. During that year, they looked into the interactions with Gracie, in particular her report that she was being stalked by Michael. In a progress update issued in November, they said, "Our investigation is considering whether the force carried out all its safeguarding obligations to Miss Spinks and whether its investigation into the stalking matter was carried out in accordance with the relevant police guidelines and policies." The update also mentioned the bag with the weapons in was found. So with a bag, basically a local woman found a brown Nike rucksack on a farm track that were really close to where Gracie had been murdered. It were apparently only about 300 yards away, and inside the bag was an axe, a hammer, several knives, which looked to me like some sort of assault knives, whatever type of knives they are, the serious knives. There was also clothing, a water bottle, and a piece of paper with the words "Don't lie" written on it. Finally, there was a receipt. The woman phoned the police, they came and retrieved it off her. Now let's bear in mind, this is only 6 weeks before Gracie was murdered. Strangely, I haven't read anywhere that this bag or the things in it was DNA tested or fingerprinted. And there's clothes in there and a water bottle, so there's a good chance that there'd be some solid DNA within that bag. It was later deemed that the receipt inside the bag was linked by a card to the house, the family house that Michael Sellers were living in. So we have a bag that's extremely suspicious near a farm where Gracie, who's recently reported someone for stalking her, frequents a lot. And it turns out to be linked to the person who she's alleged to be stalking her. Now, in my opinion, it's a far stretch to say that the police should have seen the link. However, it's also my opinion that this bag should have been checked out. If I was a police officer that retrieved this bag, I'd want to know whose bag it were, where was it, when were it placed there? And more importantly, why is it there? Anyone could have found this bag. As kids, we used to go off in farmers' fields and stuff. They could have found this bag. And if you were walking around the streets and the police stopped you for whatever reason and saw the contents of this in your bag, you'd be in serious bother if you didn't have a good reason to have them in, with proof of that reason. So the fact that it's just laying around seems even more sus to me. And it's not even just because the stuff inside this bag's are weapons, it's also the contents in its value. The stuff inside this bag has to be like, what, £30 each? So we're talking over £100. So it's in my opinion that this bag should have been fully checked as a suspicious package in which it were. Had it been checked, had the receipt been followed then, when it linked back to Michael, they should have then ran his name through a database which should have come up saying that he'd just been done for stalking. or at least reported for stalking. After the investigation from the IOPC, disciplinary notices were served to 5 police officers. 2 were served with notices of the handling of the allegations of stalking against Michael Sellers. A sergeant and 2 constables were served with misconduct over the steps they took regarding the bag of weapons. It was determined disciplinary proceeds in the form of misconduct meeting should be brought against each officer. That is the end of the case. But that isn't where it stops, is it? 6 months ago, in October 2022, to mark Gracie's 25th birthday, GracieSpinks.com was launched. It tells Gracie's story, and it also has information on what they're trying to do about it. You see, a family are campaigning for Gracie's Law. Gracie's Law would ideally increase funding for investigations into stalking cases. The entire point of their petition, which by the way did reach 100,000 signatures, so it did get discussed in Parliament, isn't only to raise funds for the force, it's also to raise information, raise awareness, and make sure authorities are taking it more seriously. There has been changes. Their efforts have made a difference, but not as much as they'd like, and not as much as needs to be done for here in Derbyshire and across the entire country. The way I see it, stalking isn't about whether they take your life or not. Even if you do survive, even if they don't actually try to murder you, this is absolutely awful to be a victim of. This is a life-ruining thing. And I do have to say, as I always do, the thing that bothers me is surrounded this subject, it always says protect women. Now, obviously, I am pro protecting women, but the statistics say that this is not just women. You know I love my statistics, so I looked it up. And the Office of National Statistics for the UK said that there were 1,767,000 stalking victims in the year ending March 2022. 33% of them were men. Safe Horizons of the US reckon in the US, 15% of women have been victims of stalking and 6% of men have been victims of stalking. That means that there's about 28 to 30% of them victims are male as well. In the description below, I have links and website for people that are currently having this issue of being stalked. In the UK, the base of advice is to take detailed notes of everything. Really detailed notes. Every time they make contact with you, every time you see them, directly or indirectly, report it to the police, note it down. When you report things to the police, note down what time it were, what date it were, what police officer you reported it to. Don't delete anything. Try to ignore and do not react to any attempts at contacting you by the stalker. Avoid going out alone and keep to busy places. And that's even more important if you feel like you need to run. If you feel like you need to run, don't run somewhere where you're going to be excluded. Make sure you're running to a shop or something like that. Please check out the links below for more information. One of the biggest reasons I do these types of videos and podcasts is to spread the message. Why can't we do more about stalking? Now, I understand things like the reason we got rid of capital punishment in the UK is because after it was too late, people were found to be innocent. Why can't we do more about stalking? If you stop someone from going near someone, if you put a restraining order on someone, if you put monitors on someone, ankle bracelets, whatever, there's no bad side to that. If you accuse me of stalking, I'd happily let you put an ankle bracelet on me for a couple of weeks to prove that I weren't. I don't know what the solution is. I haven't thought about it all that much while I've been writing this because I've been too busy fixated on the case. But I'm fairly sure there is some quite simple things that we could do that don't have a negative side effect. That is all I've got to say, and I'm going to leave it there. I do want to give one last shout out though for anybody that has wanting to purchase an hoodie. Today's Sunday, so you've got till tomorrow night. When Monday ends in the UK, that is it. There will be no more hoodies. I feel really heartless for putting that end of my video, but I'd feel bad if I didn't notify you. Thank you all for watching. See you next week.